Earth's puny fleet of cobbled-together garbage scows was about to royally fuck up the galactic status quo. Hundreds of alien eyes burned into Noah's back as he strode out of the council chambers, the soles of his shoes clacking against polished marble floors that had never before been tread upon by a mere human. The audacity, the suicidal gall. That was the prevailing sentiment from the assembled alien delegates, still chattering and gesticulating after the historic proclamation from humanity's sole Federation representative. Earth, a primitive backwater that had only recently stumbled its way into the stars, dared to pledge aid to the beleaguered Yggdrasil when the galaxy's great powers cowered on the sidelines. When the reptilian warmongers of the Orcari Dominion were mere cycles away from grinding the Yggdrasil homeworld beneath their clawed heels? It was unthinkable, absurd, and more than one ambassador was already scheming to pick the bones of the human upstarts once the Orcari were done with them. Noah allowed himself a tight smile as he loosened his tie with one hand, the other tapping out a sequence of coded phrases on his wrist communicator. The poor fools had no idea what was coming. The sad little fleet that Earth had publicly revealed thus far, with its rusted freighters and decrepit patrolcraft, was but a mummer's farce, a calculated misdirection. Hidden in the void between galaxies, shielded from prying eyes, was a true armada, cutting-edge voidcraft that outclassed anything the great powers could muster. But it was the humans themselves that the galaxy should truly fear, men and women with the strength of giants, the speed of ghosts, trained from birth in the art of war, and armed with technology beyond the aliens' comprehension. As his coded message raced through the cosmos to the awaiting fleet, Noah let his smile grow into a wolfish, predatory grin that would have sent chills down the spines of the alien counselors. By this time tomorrow, the Orcari would be a bad memory, and the galaxy would learn to fear the hidden might of Earth. A month had passed since Noah's momentous proclamation before the Galactic Council. Now the fateful day had arrived as a massive Orcari invasion fleet loomed menacingly over Yggdrasil Prime, the last major colony of the beleaguered Yggdrasil. The Orcari warships were brutal and angular, their hulls covered in vicious spikes and bristling with cruel weaponry that promised only pain and devastation. In stark contrast, the Yggdrasil defense ships were elegant, gleaming silver crescents that seemed to dance among the stars. But for all their beauty, they were hopelessly outmatched against the sheer firepower of the Orcari. It would be a slaughter, and everyone knew it. On the bridge of the Orcari flagship, Warlord Crux grinned evilly, revealing rows of jagged teeth that had torn the flesh from countless enemies. His clawed finger hovered over the firing controls, ready to unleash hell upon the hapless Yggdrasil. But suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship as new contacts appeared on the sensors. Crux's eyes widened in disbelief as a fleet of human vessels dropped out of warp, smoothly taking up defensive positions around the Yggdrasil colony like a protective shield. The human ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek and black, all gentle curves and smooth surfaces, they looked more like sculptures than warships. The Orcari targeting sensors struggled to lock onto their strangely fluid lines, the readings flickering and scattering. Crux snarled in rage and barked the order to open fire. The Orcari ships unleashed a devastating barrage, plasma bolts and missiles screaming through the void with deadly intent. But the human vessels simply seemed to flow around the incoming fire, weaving and shifting with impossible grace, as though the attacks were merely a gentle breeze. A stray shot glanced off some kind of shimmering energy field, encasing a human ship, dissipating harmlessly. The vessel continued on undaunted, its mirrored black hull unmarred. With a smoothness that belied the suddenness of their response, the human fleet glided into attack formation and opened fire. Brilliant lances of blinding white light, intense and sharply focused, stabbed out from their ships, spearing through the Orcari vessels' hulls with surgical precision. The beams punched through thick armor like it was tissue paper, unerringly seeking out vital systems and slicing them apart. Orcari ships exploded soundlessly as their reactors went critical or their ammunition stores cooked off catastrophically. Crux could only stare slack-jawed, as his vaunted warships, the pride of the Orcari Dominion, were effortlessly torn apart by the deceptively beautiful human craft and their impossibly precise beam weapons. In a matter of moments, the once mighty Orcari fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage and clouds of cooling plasma. Outnumbered and outclassed, the remaining Orcari ships turned tail and fled, limping away in a ragged retreat. Against all odds, against all expectations, the Yixiel colony was safe, protected by the mysterious power of Earth's true might. The galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council chambers erupted into pandemonium. Stunned delegates shouted over each other, their voices rising in a cacophony of shock and outrage as the recordings of the Earth Fleet's decisive victory over the Orcari played on repeat across the massive view screens. The sleek obsidian ships danced through hails of enemy fire, their impossibly nimble movements and devastating beam weapons laying waste to the once feared Orcari armada. In the eye of the storm, Noah Gray rose from his seat, his expression calm and collected. He strode purposefully towards the central podium, ignoring the accusatory stares and heated whispers that followed in his wake. As he stepped up to the speaker's stand, the room fell into an expectant hush, every eye fixed on the enigmatic human ambassador. "People of the Galactic Federation," Noah began, his rich baritone carrying effortlessly through the cavernous chamber. "For the past century, Earth has been a proud and dedicated member of this august body. While we may have been relative newcomers to the galactic stage, we have always strived to uphold the ideals of cooperation, mutual defense, and peaceful coexistence that lie at the heart of the Federation." Noah paused, letting his words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "In that spirit, even as we took our first tentative steps into the wider galaxy, humanity has been quietly developing our own unique technologies, not as a means of aggression or dominance, but as a way to better contribute to the common good. We did not seek to hide these advancements out of malice or deceit, but rather out of a desire to prove ourselves as worthy allies through our actions, not simply through the might of our weapons." Murmurs rippled through the gathered dignitaries, as Noah fielded a barrage of questions with practiced ease, his responses measured and diplomatic. In a shadowed alcove at the edge of the council floor, Tyro Vexis hunched over his datapad, his eyes widening as he pored over the specs of the Earthships, designated the Scylla class. The designs were like nothing he had ever seen. Inertial dampeners that generated localized gravity wells to counter G-forces, allowing the ships to perform high-speed maneuvers that would reduce any other crew to a thin paste against the bulkheads. Reactive crystalline armor that could dynamically deform to deflect and dissipate incoming fire. And those beam weapons, Tyro swallowed hard as he read the details. Catalyst fields that selectively stripped away atomic bonds, literally disintegrating the target material at a molecular level, clean, efficient, and utterly devastating. As the council members continued to bicker and posture, Tyro felt an icy knot of dread settling in his gut. The implications were inescapable. Any one of these Earth technologies could irrevocably shift the balance of power in the galaxy, and now every would-be conqueror and tyrant in the Federation knew it. By saving the Yixiel, the humans hadn't just earned an ally, they had placed themselves squarely in the crosshairs of every ambitious despot and warmonger in the known universe. Tyro watched as the arguments grew more heated, the council fragmenting into a dozen competing factions before his eyes. This was only the beginning, he realized with mounting horror. The revelation of Earth's true capabilities had shattered the careful equilibrium that had kept the peace for generations. Now the race was on to uncover the secrets of humanity's mysterious technologies, and the galaxy would be the battleground. In a dimly lit corner of the infamous Zathari station, a seedy den of iniquity nestled in the lawless fringes of the galaxy, a group of shadowy figures gathered. The air was thick with the acrid stench of illicit smoke and the murmur of clandestine deals being struck. Around a battered plasteel table sat representatives from some of the most ruthless and powerful races in the galaxy. The reptilian Zindi, insectoid krill, and the all-too-familiar, brutish Orcari. They leaned forward, speaking in hushed tones, as they discussed the recent upheaval caused by Earth's sudden ascendancy. "The humans and their damnable technology have upset the balance," the Orcari ambassador growled, slamming a meaty fist on the table. The impact sent a spiderweb of cracks radiating through the cheap material. "My fleet lies in ruins because of them." The Krill representative chittered angrily, compound eyes glittering. "Their advancements threaten our monopolies," it hissed, "our profits. If the humans are allowed to propagate this technology, we could lose everything." "Then we must act," the Xindi delegate said smoothly, her scaled features shifting into a predatory smile. "I propose an alliance. We pool our resources to acquire the humans' secrets by any means necessary." The Orcari leaned forward, jagged teeth bared in a vicious grin. "Theft, infiltration, I like it." "And once we have their technology," the Xindi continued, "we arrange for some unfortunate accidents to befall Earth's shipyards. Ensure they can never build such ships again." Nods and grunts of approval circled the table. "Then we are agreed," the Krill clacked. "We will need to plan carefully, infiltrate their facilities, steal the plans for those Scylla ships and their weapons." The meeting adjourned with a sense of dark purpose, the conspirators fading back into the shadows of Zathari Station. Light years away on the gleaming bridge of the EDF Athena, Noah Gray stood before the expansive viewing window. The inky void stretched out before him, the stars cold and uncaring. Despite the victory over the Orcari, Noah couldn't shake the sense of unease that tightened his gut. Earth had revealed its hand, and not everyone in the galactic community would be content to let the newcomers keep their technological edge. Reaching out, Noah pressed his palm against the reinforced diamond silicon alloy of the window. The Athena was a marvel, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. But he knew all too well that the galaxy was filled with those who would stop at nothing to claim that technology for themselves. Under the watchful gaze of the stars, Noah made a silent vow. Earth had taken its first step into a larger universe, and they would need to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Noah's fears were realized sooner than he could have imagined. Just a week after his address to the Galactic Federation, the Titan shipyard was the scene of a brazen infiltration attempt. A squad of Krill operatives, their chitinous exoskeletons disguised beneath stolen maintenance uniforms, scuttled through the station's dimly lit service tunnels. Their compound eyes glinted with malicious intent as they neared their target, the central data core housing the priceless Scylla-class schematics. The Krill moved with practiced efficiency, their clawed appendages deftly splicing into the core's security systems. But as they attempted to breach the final firewall, a silent alarm tripped. The infiltrators froze, antennae twitching, as they realized their mistake. In that instant, the air shimmered and a dozen heavily armed human marines materialized, their pulse rifles trained on the Krill. The sleek black armor of the marines' exosuits drank in the dim light, their faceplates inscrutable. "Step away from the console," the lead marine barked, his voice distorted by his helmet's vocoder. "Lay down your weapons." The Krill, knowing their mission was compromised, reacted with desperate violence. Plasma rifles emerged from beneath their disguises, and they opened fire, superheated bolts scorching the air. The Marines responded instantly, their pulse rifles spitting streams of hypersonic flechettes. The cramped confines of the data core became a whirlwind of ricocheting projectiles and sizzling plasma. Despite their superior numbers, the Krill found themselves outmatched. The Marines moved with fluid precision, their powered armor enhancing their speed and strength. They took cover behind reinforced data stacks, using the terrain to their advantage. As the firefight intensified, the Krill squad leader saw his chance slipping away. In a last desperate gambit, he leveled his plasma rifle at the data core and fired a sustained burst, hoping to destroy the precious Scylla schematics. To his utter shock, the plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against the core's housing, the molten energy dissipating like water on glass. The data core remained pristine, untouched. The Marine sergeant allowed himself a tight smile beneath his helmet. "Did you really think we wouldn't learn from the Council's reaction to our tech?" He gestured to the data core with his rifle barrel. "That right there is protected by the same reactive crystalline shielding as our ships. You'd have an easier time shooting through a black hole." With their plan in shambles and their forces rapidly dwindling, the Krill had no choice but to surrender. The Marines moved in, efficiently subduing and restraining the infiltrators. News of the thwarted data theft spread like wildfire. Within hours, Noah Gray stood once more before the Galactic Federation, his expression grave as he addressed the assembled delegates. "People of the Federation," he began, his voice ringing with controlled anger. "It is my solemn duty to inform you that a mere week after our last meeting, Earth's trust was betrayed in the most egregious manner." Noah proceeded to lay out the details of the infiltration attempt, naming the races responsible. Gasps and murmurs echoed through the chamber as the evidence was presented, irrefutable and damning. "Earth came to this body in the spirit of cooperation and mutual defense," Noah continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We shared our technology freely, hoping to usher in a new era of peace and prosperity for all. And this is how we are repaid." The accused races shouted their protests, but their words rang hollow against the weight of Noah's revelations. The human ambassador raised a hand, silencing the clamor. "In light of this grievous breach of trust, Earth has no choice but to launch a full investigation into this incident, and any others like it. We will root out those who would seek to undermine the stability and security of the galactic community, wherever they may hide." As Noah yielded the floor, the Federation erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, and long-standing alliances began to fracture. The repercussions of the Krill's failed gambit were only beginning to unfold. And through it all, one question hung unspoken in the air, heavy with consequence. What would Earth do next? Earth's patience had run out. The failed Krill infiltration had been the last straw, and the human response was as swift as it was resolute. A mere week after the thwarted theft, long-range sensors detected a massive joint fleet of Xindi, Krill, and Orcari ships massing at the edge of the Sol system. The alien vessels hung in space like a coiled viper, their weapons primed and ready. It was a blatant provocation, a challenge to Earth's sovereignty that could not go unanswered. In the cavernous hangar bays of the EDF Athena, the pride of Earth's Scylla-class dreadnoughts, newly promoted Admiral Noah Gray strode purposefully towards his waiting dropship. His boots rang against the deck plates, the sound echoing through the bustling space. Around him, the hangar was a hive of activity as the mighty vessel prepared for war. Technicians swarmed over the sleek black hulls of the Scylla-class frigates and cruisers, running final checks on the ship's advanced systems. Armored Marines hustled to their transports, the light glinting off their polished exosuits. Noah paused at the base of his dropship's ramp, his eyes sweeping over the organized chaos. The tension in the air was palpable, a coiled spring ready to unleash. Every man and woman aboard the Athena knew the stakes, knew that this was the moment Earth would draw its line in the stars. With a final nod to his waiting adjutant, Noah boarded the dropship. Minutes later, he stepped onto the Athena's bridge, the view screens already alive with tactical data. The alien fleet hung in the void before them, a bristling wall of metal and menace. "Admiral on deck," the bridge crew snapped to attention. "As you were," Noah said, his voice calm and even. He moved to the central command chair, his gaze never leaving the tactical display. "What's our status?" "The Scylla fleet is in position and awaiting your orders, Admiral," the tactical officer reported crisply. "We're picking up weapon signatures from the alien ships. They're charging up." Noah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. So it would be war then. He had hoped that a show of force would be enough to deter the aliens, but it seemed they were determined to test Earth's resolve. "Bring the fleet to combat alert," he ordered, his words ringing through the hushed bridge. "All ships, stand by to engage the enemy." There was a moment of tense silence, the calm before the storm. Then, with a blinding flash, the alien fleet opened fire. A hurricane of plasma bolts and corkscrewing missiles erupted from their ships, hurtling across the void towards the human vessels. But the Scylla-class ships were ready. With a fluid grace that belied their size, the human vessels slipped through the barrage, their reactive armor shimmering as stray shots dissipated against the hulls. The aliens' targeting computers struggled to lock onto the strangely elastic contours of the human ships, their firing solutions scattering like leaves in the wind. "Enemy fire ineffective," the tactical officer reported, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Our ships are undamaged." Noah allowed himself a tight smile. "Then let's show them what we can do," he said grimly. "All ships engage at will, fire at will." With those words, the human fleet went on the offensive. The Scylla-class ships seemed to dance through the void, their movements impossibly agile for vessels of their size. They wove through the enemy formations like ghosts, always one step ahead of the aliens' desperate fire. And then, with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training, the human ships struck back. Lances of blinding white light stabbed out from their bow-mounted disintegrator arrays, each beam a needle-thin lance of pure annihilation. Where those beams touched, alien ships simply came apart. Hulls shattered like glass as the disintegrator fields ripped through them at a molecular level. Decks flashed into vapor as the beams sliced deep into the vessel's cores. Orcari battlecruisers, Zindi dreadnoughts, Krill warspheres, none could withstand the devastating power of the human weapons. The alien return fire grew increasingly desperate, plasma bolts and missiles filling the void, in a futile attempt to overwhelm the human defenses. But the Scylla-class ship's reactive armor held firm, the quantum fields harmlessly dissipating the incoming fire. In a matter of minutes, the once proud alien fleet was reduced to a shattered remnant, their ships fleeing before the human onslaught. The Zindi, Krill, and Orcari vessels limped away from the Sol system, trailing atmosphere and debris, their crews no doubt stunned by the sudden and crushing defeat. On the bridge of the Athena, a cheer went up from the crew as the last alien ship vanished from the tactical display. But Noah Gray did not join in the celebration. His eyes remained fixed on the starfield, his expression pensive. This was a victory, yes, but he knew it was only the beginning. Earth had drawn its line, had shown the galaxy the price of aggression, but there would be repercussions, consequences to their actions. Even now he could imagine the frantic meetings taking place on 100 worlds as the news of the battle spread. Some, no doubt, would look to Earth with newfound respect, seeing a potential ally against the old bullies of the galaxy. Already, his display was lighting up with requests for communication, petitions for diplomatic envoys. But others would see Earth as a threat, a challenge to the status quo that had held for centuries. The Zindi and their allies would not take this humiliation lightly. They would scheme, plot, looking for any weakness to exploit. And they would come again, Noah knew, with new weapons, new strategies. The battle for Earth's place in the galaxy was only just beginning. But as he looked out at the stars, at the sleek black shapes of the Scylla-class ships standing vigilant, Noah allowed himself a moment of pride. Come what may, Earth would be ready. They would not back down, would not be intimidated. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to stand against the full might of humanity, and Noah Gray would be there, on the front lines, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the Zindi fleet retreated in disarray from the Sol system, their ships sparking and venting atmosphere from the human onslaught, the mood on the Athena's bridge was far from celebratory. Admiral Noah Gray stared at the tactical display, his brow furrowed in thought. "This isn't over," he said grimly. "The Zindi will be back and they'll be looking for blood." His words proved prophetic. Mere days later, a distress call reached Earth from the remote colony of Axiom. The message was garbled, the transmission interrupted by bursts of static, but the few words that could be made out painted a chilling picture. Explosions in the power plant, life support failing, need immediate assistance. Noah wasted no time. Within hours, a task force of Scylla-class frigates was speeding towards Axiom, their holds packed with emergency supplies and repair crews. The Admiral himself oversaw the mission from the bridge of the EDF Hyperion, his face set in lines of grim determination. But as the human ships emerged from warp at the edge of the Axiom system, they found themselves flying into a trap. A Xindi fleet, far larger than the one that had attacked Saul, was waiting in ambush, their ships arrayed in a deadly crescent formation. On the Hyperion's bridge, alarms blared as the sensor officer called out, "Multiple enemy contacts, they're launching fighters." Noah gripped the arms of his command chair. "All ships, evasive maneuvers, engage at will." The human frigates scattered, their sleek black hulls twisting and turning as they sought to evade the incoming fire. But something was different this time. The Xindi weapons, usually so ineffective against the human ship's reactive armor, were punching through the Scylla-class shields with alarming regularity. The bridge shook as a plasma bolt slammed into the Hyperion's flank, alarms screaming as the damage reports flooded in. Noah clung to his chair, his knuckles white. "Report!" he barked. "They've adapted, sir," the tactical officer replied, her voice taut with strain. "Some kind of quantum phase shift in their weapons. Our armor can't deflect it." Another impact rocked the ship, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. On the view screen, Noah watched in horror as one of his frigates, its hull breached in a dozen places, shattered under the Xindi onslaught. "We can't take much more of this," the helm officer warned. "We need to pull back." Noah gritted his teeth, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he had to do. The colonists on Axiom were counting on them, but to press the attack now would be suicide. "All ships fall back," he ordered, the words bitter on his tongue. "Maximum warp, get us out of here." As the battered remnants of the task force limped away from Axiom, leaving the besieged colony to its fate, Noah slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. This was a disaster, and he knew the repercussions would be swift and severe. On Earth, news of the ambush and the abandonment of Axiom spread like wildfire. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Crowds gathered outside the Earth Defense Force headquarters, demanding action, retribution against the Xindi. But in the halls of power, cooler heads prevailed. Noah, his uniform still stained with the smoke of battle, stood before the Earth Council, his voice firm and resolute. "This was a trap," he said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled councillors. "The Xindi want to provoke us into a full-scale war, one we're not ready for. We need time to regroup, to adapt to their new weapons." There was grumbling from some quarters, calls for immediate retaliation, but Noah held firm. "We can't do this alone," he continued. "We need allies. The Xindi have made enemies across the galaxy. It's time we started reaching out to them." As the council session broke up, Noah was already in motion, striding towards the communications center. There was no time to waste. Earth needed friends, and it needed them now. In the days that followed, diplomatic channels hummed with activity, as Earth's ambassadors worked tirelessly to build a coalition against Xindi aggression. Old grudges were set aside, ancient rivalries put on hold in the face of this new threat. And in the shipyards of Earth and its allies, a new generation of warships began to take shape. Engineers and scientists worked around the clock, incorporating new technologies and tactics to counter the Xindi's quantum weapons. The galaxy held its breath, watching and waiting as the two sides gathered their forces. The Xindi, flush with their victory at Axiom, grew bolder, their raids and incursions into Earth-allied space becoming more frequent and more brutal. But Earth and its new allies met each challenge, their fleets growing in strength and numbers with each passing day. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the Galactic Order. And on the bridge of his new flagship, the EDF Nemesis, Admiral Noah Gray stood ready to meet that challenge head-on. The Xindi had started this war, but by all that was holy, Earth would finish it. The crew of the Nemesis bustled around Noah as he stood at the central holotable, studying the latest intelligence reports. The Xindi fleet was on the move again, their ships massing on the borders of Earth-allied space. Noah's eyes narrowed as he took in the enemy's disposition. They were up to something, that much was clear. But what? Another raid? An invasion? or something worse. He tapped a series of commands into the holotable, bringing up a live feed from the long-range sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Xindi ships were changing, their hulls rippling and shifting like quicksilver. Before his eyes they transformed, taking on new grotesque shapes. Spikes and protrusions erupted from their surfaces, glowing with an eerie, sickly light. "Oh my God," someone whispered from behind him. "What are they doing?" Noah had no answer. In all his years, he had never seen anything like this. The Xindi ships no longer looked like ships at all. They looked like living things, monstrous and twisted. And they were getting closer. "All hands to battle stations," Noah ordered, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped his heart. "This is it, people. The Xindi are coming, and they've brought hell with them." Deep within the beleaguered colony, beyond the reach of the Xindi blockade, a sleek, unmarked ship slipped through the shadows, landing on the outskirts of the settlement with a whisper of displaced air. The hatch hissed open, and a figure emerged, clad head to toe in a matte black EVA suit that seemed to drink in the light. Admiral Noah Gray had come to Axiom. He signaled to his team, a hand-picked group of Earth's most lethal warriors. Like wraiths, they melted into the gloom, moving with purpose towards the colony's service tunnels. The suit's reactive camouflage shifted and flowed, blending them seamlessly into the blasted concrete and twisted metal of the ruined cityscape. Deeper into the labyrinth they pushed, navigating by the ghostly glow of their helmet HUDs. The tunnels lead them ever closer to the colony's command center, the heart of the resistance. Echoes of distant battle filtered through the gloom, a reminder of the desperate fight for survival happening above. A final turn, a blast door, and they were through. Noah strode into the command center, his suit shifting back to its matte black default. Governor Lena Sorensen looked up from a holomap, her face gaunt, but her eyes ablaze with defiance. Around her, the surviving colonists, grim-faced and battle-weary, snapped to attention at the sight of Earth's greatest hero. "Admiral Gray," Sorensen said, her voice rough with exhaustion and smoke. "I'd say it's a pleasure, but given the circumstances—" Noah clasped her hand firmly. "We're here to get you out, Governor, all of you." Sorensen shook her head. "We're not done fighting, Admiral. This is our home. We won't abandon it." A ghost of a smile crossed Noah's face. "Then let's take it back." As one, the colonists and Earth soldiers turned to the holomap, the blue glow casting their faces in sharp relief. Noah's finger stabbed at a series of key locations: armories, vehicle depots, command posts. "We hit them hard and fast," he said. His voice hardened with resolve. "Sabotage their equipment, cut off their supply lines. We make them bleed for every inch." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as strike teams were assembled and missions assigned. Noah's soldiers, the best of the best, led each team, their black suits standing out among the battered colonial armor. Above, in the smoke-filled sky, the Xindi continued their relentless assault, their grotesque ships raining fire onto the colony's battered defenses. But in the streets below, a new resistance was taking shape. Noah and his teams struck like lightning, appearing from the shadows to wreak havoc on the Xindi ground forces, before melting away once more. Supply depots erupted into flames as charges were planted and detonated. Xindi patrols were ambushed, their weapons and equipment spirited away to arm the growing resistance. With each raid, the colonists grew bolder, their morale soaring at the sight of the once invincible Xindi, falling to human ingenuity and determination. But even as the tide began to turn on the ground, the battle in orbit raged on. The beleaguered Earth fleet, struggling against the Xindi's monstrous ships, fought valiantly, but was pushed to the brink. That is, until a new shape emerged from the void. The EDF Prometheus, a dreadnought of unprecedented size and power, dropped out of warp, its hull bristling with the latest in human weaponry. At its heart, a massive railgun, the length of the ship itself, thrummed with power. On the bridge, the captain's voice rang out, "Fire!" With a thunderclap that shook the very fabric of space, the railgun spoke. A hypervelocity projectile, A chunk of metal the size of a small building hurtled towards the Xindi fleet at a fraction of the speed of light. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat, impacting the lead Xindi ship with the force of a small nova. The ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. The shockwave from the impact rippled outward, shattering the Xindi formation like glass. The Prometheus pressed forward, its railgun recharging, its escort surging ahead to engage the scattered Xindi ships. On the ground, Noah's team fought on, the tide of battle now firmly in their favor. The Xindi ground forces, cut off and demoralized, began to fall back, their lines crumbling under the relentless human assault. Victory was within grasp, but as Noah led the colonists towards the landing zone, a final challenge emerged from the ruins. A towering Xindi war mech, a bipedal machine bristling with weapons, blocked their path. Its armor, thick and resilient, shrugged off the colonists' weapons fire. Noah stepped forward, a sleek black weapon in his hands, a prototype disintegrator cannon designed to bypass the Xindi's adaptive armor. He sighted down the barrel, the war mech looming before him like a colossus. A squeeze of the trigger, a blinding flash of light, and it was over. The war mech toppled, its armor dissolving into dust as the disintegrator beam tore through it at a molecular level. As the colonists cheered and raced for the waiting evacuation ships, Noah allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Axiom was free, its people saved. But even as he looked to the stars, to the battered Earth fleet now firmly in control of the orbit, he knew this was only the beginning. The Xindi would not forget this defeat. They would return, with new weapons and new strategies, and Earth would be ready to meet them. In the wake of the successful defense of Axiom, Earth found itself with a growing array of allies. The technologically advanced Jero and the fierce Xinti warriors, long oppressed under the heel of Xindi dominance, were among the first to pledge their support. Together, this coalition began to strike back against the Xindi. The Jero proved invaluable in the cyber domain. Their hackers wormed their way into Xindi systems, causing communications blackouts and sensor malfunctions at critical moments. As a Xindi battle group moved to attack a human colony, the Jero struck, blinding and confusing their enemies. The Xindi ships blundered into an ambush, human disintegrator beams scything through their hulls. Meanwhile, the Xinti reveled in ship-to-ship combat. Their boarding pods punched through Xindi armor, disgorging squads of snarling, claw-wielding warriors. On the bridge of a Xindi dreadnought, the ship's commander gurgled his last breath as a Xinti raked his claws across the reptilian's throat. Within minutes, the mighty warship was under coalition control. At the heart of these offensives were Earth's Scylla-class ships. Their unique stealth capabilities allowed them to strike without warning, while their advanced weapons ensured no Xindi ship could withstand their assault. They wove between the lumbering Xindi vessels, their disintegrator beams cutting into vital systems with surgical precision. On the Xindi homeworld, the Grand Council was in turmoil. Admiral Zolran slammed his fist on the table, his scales flushed with rage as he demanded a redoubling of the war effort. "We must crush the humans and their allies," he snarled. "If we falter now, we invite our own destruction." But others were less certain. Councillor Vekri, known for her pragmatism, spoke up. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them," she said. "Our economy is in shambles. We must consider diplomacy, or risk everything." The debate raged for hours, but no consensus could be reached. In the end, Zolran stormed out, his heart filled with a cold, unyielding hatred for Earth and all it represented. It was in this volatile state that Zolran received a mysterious message. The sender, their identity hidden behind layers of encryption, claimed to have information that could change the course of the war. Zolran, desperate for any advantage, agreed to a meeting on a barren, uninhabited world. But when he arrived, flanked by his most trusted guards, he found only a grim-faced Noah Gray and a squad of human, Jero and Kzinti commandos. They had their weapons trained on the Xindi admiral. "Admiral Zolran," Noah said, his voice calm but laced with steel, "you've been lured here under false pretenses. We have no information for you, only an ultimatum." Zolran snarled, his hand dropping to his sidearm. But before he could draw, a Kzinti was on him, the feline warrior's claws digging into his wrist. Zolran cried out in pain, his weapon clattering to the ground. Noah stepped forward, his eyes hard. "Your war is over, Admiral. Your fleets are in ruins, your leadership divided. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." But Zolran's pride would not allow him to yield. With a roar of defiance, he lunged at Noah, his teeth bared. A human commando was faster, a single stun blast, and the Xindi admiral crumpled to the ground. As the coalition forces secured their prisoner, Noah couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. With Zolran out of the picture, the Xindi's will to fight would surely crumble. But even as this thought crossed his mind, Noah knew the true challenge still lay ahead. The Xindi were just one threat in a galaxy filled with dangers, and Earth, for all its technological might, was still the new kid on the block. They had made enemies this day, powerful enemies. The war might be ending, but the struggle was just beginning. With Zolran in custody, the Xindi hierarchy quickly descended into disarray. Councillors and admirals bickered and squabbled, vying for power in the sudden vacuum. Some called for a redoubling of the war effort, others for immediate capitulation. The once unified Xindi front fractured under the strain. Earth and its allies wasted no time in capitalizing on the chaos. A massive coalition fleet, spearheaded by the Scylla-class dreadnoughts, dropped out of warp on the fringes of the Xindi home system. Gero cyber warfare specialists immediately went to work, sowing further confusion in the Xindi ranks with a barrage of jamming and disinformation. As the fleet pushed forward, the Xindi defense forces rallied to meet them. Plasma beams and disintegrator pulses crisscrossed the void as the two armadas clashed. The Scylla-class ships, once seemingly invincible, found themselves facing a deadly new threat. The Xindi had developed a pulsing energy field that reacted violently with the human ship's crystalline armor, causing it to warp and shatter. The EDF Nemesis, pride of the fleet, shuddered under the onslaught, its sleek hull marred by ugly pulsating scars. On the bridge, warning klaxons blared as the ship's systems struggled to compensate. Noah Gray gritted his teeth as he watched another human ship, its armor failing, break apart under the relentless Xindi barrage. "All ships, evasive pattern Delta," Noah barked into the fleet-wide comm. "Watch those pulses." But even as the human ships danced and weaved, the toll mounted. The EDF Valiant, the Intrepid, the Dauntless, one by one, Earth's mighty warships fell, their crews fighting to the bitter end. On the ground, the situation was no less dire. Noah led a desperate charge against the Xindi's central command bunker, his troops a motley mix of human, Gero, and Kzinti warriors. They fought yard by bloody yard, trading fire with the entrenched Xindi defenders. A searing pulse blast took Noah's second-in-command, Commander Jiang Li, in the chest. He fell without a sound, his eyes wide with shock. Noah roared in anguish, his rifle spitting retribution. They breached the bunker's outer defenses, but at a terrible cost. The ground was littered with the bodies of the fallen, alien and human alike. Noah himself took a glancing hit to the leg, the pulse blast shattering bone and searing flesh. He stumbled, nearly fell, but caught himself on the shoulder of a Kzinti warrior. "On me!" he shouted through gritted teeth. "For Earth, for the fallen!" With a collective roar, the remaining coalition troops surged forward, following their limping, bloodied commander. They stormed the command center, rifles blazing, cutting down the last of the Xindi resistance. And then suddenly it was over. The remaining Xindi leaders, seeing the futility of further struggle, signaled their surrender. The coalition had won. The war was over. But as Noah stood there, leaning heavily on his rifle, surveying the blasted ruins of the command center, he felt no elation, only a bone-deep weariness and an aching sense of loss. The price of victory had been high, too high. In the days that followed, as the fires of war cooled to embers, the true toll became clear. Worlds lay in ruin, their populations decimated. The great races of the galaxy, once bound together by the crisis, now eyed each other warily, old animosities resurfacing in the wake of the conflict. And Earth, the shining beacon that had united them all, now found itself viewed through a lens of suspicion and fear. The power of the Scylla-class ships, once a symbol of human ingenuity and resolve, now seemed a looming threat in the eyes of many. For Noah Gray, the weight of it all proved too much to bear. The ghosts of those he had lost, the decisions he had made, the blood on his hands, they haunted him, dogging his every step. And so, with little fanfare, the great hero of the Zindi War quietly slipped into retirement, seeking solace in solitude. The Galactic Federation, its illusions of unity shattered, struggled to find a new equilibrium. Reform movements sprouted and withered, grand speeches were made and forgotten, and through it all, the scars of the war remained, unhealed and festering. Earth, exhausted by the conflict and wary of further entanglements, turned inward. The great shipyards, once abuzz with the construction of mighty warships, fell silent. The Scylla-class dreadnoughts, marvels of human engineering and resolve, were decommissioned one by one. Their gleaming hulls left to gather dust in orbital boneyards. In the grand halls of power, the great and the good spoke of peace, of a new era of understanding and cooperation, but in the border worlds and the backwater stations, in the hushed conversations of smugglers and spies, a different story was told. The galaxy had changed, they whispered. The old rules no longer applied. In the wake of the Zindi War, a new age had dawned, an age of uncertainty and strife, an age where the strong would prey upon the weak, where old grudges would bloom into fresh conflicts. The drums of war, once silenced, began to beat anew, and in his quiet corner of Earth a haunted Noah Gray dreamed of fire and blood. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.